All right, PFP parents, coaches, got an important message for you today, especially if you find yourself maybe falling into this category. I'm a perfectionist, or if your son or daughter is a bit of a perfectionist. I'm going to go a little deeper into it and figure out why is it that you're a perfectionist, what is it that you're trying to grab from that perfectionism, and ultimately my goal today is just to show you how this is costing you. It's costing your athlete big time. It's costing them not just their performance, but also their mindset, their mental health. Perfectionism is rooted in two things. And if we really break it down, these two things never lead anywhere good. The first is fear. Fear of falling behind, fear of being embarrassed, fear of not measuring up, fear of letting somebody down, fear of disappointing people. A lot of perfectionism, which is our attempt at saying, that wasn't good enough, or hey, look, only the bad thing. That's the only thing that matters, the bad thing. The good things aren't that great. It's the bad things that matter. When we do this, when we point out only the bad things we do, or the things that we fall short on, it's usually rooted in some sort of fear. Our efforts are rooted in fear. The other side, equally as detrimental, rooted in greed, right? Perfectionism sometimes, most of the times the student athletes I work with, it's over here. But every once in a while, and this one's harder to tell somebody, it's just rooted in this kind of selfish ambition of like reaching for something because you want the spotlight on you. And if we go a couple layers deeper into that, the reason why we want a spotlight on us is because we either were rewarded for that as kids or we didn't get enough of it. And we saw other people rewarded for it. Our older sibling, big brother, big sister, they were always they were always in the spotlight. And so now I want that. So it might be rooted in greed. But regardless of if your perfectionism is rooted in fear or greed, it doesn't lead to anywhere good. That's the point. It leads to these three things. Most perfectionism leads to these three things. Now, you might say to yourself, well, it's my strive for perfection in all I do that allows me to accomplish so much. We're not talking about the strive for perfection today because the strive is healthy. The make-believe idea that you're actually going to achieve this, right? Whatever your ideal is. And I'm a 1 on the Enneagram, which means I'm a reformer, which means I'm always going for the ideal, right? It's always like, guys, we're not there yet. We got to be better. We got to be better. But nobody really likes to be around perfectionists to that level because it's not realistic. To achieve perfection is not realistic. To strive for perfection is healthy. So we got to figure out how to separate those two. But I'm going to go into this. Again, please share this with your athlete. If your son or daughter is really, really messing themselves up and experiencing a lot of frustration and dissatisfaction, it's probably because they have never really understood this. And for a long time, they've been celebrated for this. And they might even look at it as a source of pride. Right? I'm a perfectionist. I've heard people say that as if it's a good thing, but it's really not the best thing. So the first thing that this fear and greed that come from perfectionism, the first thing it leads to is something called chronic dissatisfaction. Chronic dissatisfaction. I hear athletes all the time say, I'm never satisfied. If you're never satisfied, what kind of life is that? What kind of career in sports is that? Never satisfied? When are you going to be satisfied is my question to you. Is it when you finally reach the pinnacle of your career? Have you decided what that is? Is that even attainable, or is it up here? Is it the unrealistic pursuit of perfection that is this thing that you're eventually going to be satisfied when you hit it? Probably not. So it leads to chronic dissatisfaction. We're going to talk about the opposite of that in a couple of weeks. The second thing that this fear and greed that come from perfectionism leads to is increased anxiety or nervousness before games, which is the mild form. But anxiety is what a lot of athletes claim to experience before games, during games, and it's because they're falling short or because they have thoughts going through their mind about how they're going to fall short, how they're not going to achieve this. Which, if you're a baseball player, this is going 5 for 5 from the plate. If you're a lacrosse player, this is not missing a shot. If you're a basketball player, this is not missing a jump shot or a free throw. Like, that's what sometimes is in people's minds And it leads to this increased anxiety just because it's not realistic. Perfectionism is not real. Pursuing perfection is healthy, but thinking that you're going to get there, man, like it's not going to help you in the long run. So it's going to lead to increased anxiety or nervousness. Am I convincing you yet that this probably isn't a good place to live? Probably not a good place to live in this perfectionism world. And then the last thing, you know this because you've been around this before. And maybe some other people, when they get around you, they think this or feel this. Nobody likes to be around a perfectionist. When things are never good enough, when things are never up to your standards, nobody really enjoys that. So it leads to frustrated and annoyed, got to get down low here, teammates or peers. So if you fear people not liking you, or you fear people not accepting you, I don't think that's healthy. But if you do, then, you probably should stop the perfectionism, because people don't really like to be around people who are so far in the clouds about what they're shooting for that nobody could ever hit it. So no teammate wants to be around that. So hopefully I've given you a picture of what this perfectionism is, number one, rooted in. It's rooted in fear or greed. Most of the time, what I find at least, it's over here. But there's a few that, if they're honest with themselves, they just really want to be in the spotlight, but they don't know why. Right? They don't know really that it's not going to lead them to any kind of satisfaction. And then when we stay here for long enough, we are chronically dissatisfied, which is, last time I asked an athlete that question, do you want to, by the end of your sports career, do you want to get to the end and say, I was dissatisfied the entire time? I never felt good about myself. I've never heard an athlete say, yes, that's the story that I want to tell. Increased anxiety, and then frustrated and annoyed teammates and peers. So this is food for thought for the next week. Next week when we come back, we're going to talk about some solutions to this and how to turn perfectionism into something healthy that fuels you, that motivates you, rather than does these three things, which is what's happening right now in a lot of cases. So digest this, think on it, take some steps away from it this week. Find out where you're doing this. This week, it's really just all about recognizing and becoming aware of when you're in this perfectionism mentality. We'll see you in PFP if you're coming in this week. If not, jump on next week for Facebook Live, and we'll walk you through solutions to this stuff. Talk to you guys soon. Peace.